Thanks for joining us for another episode of Net Builders 360. I'm your host and the creator, RJ Stewart. Remember, smash that like button, subscribe so you can see all of our new videos coming up. But for now, enjoy the show. Hey, Net Builders, thanks for joining us for another episode. Today we have Brain Champagne CEO and founder, Sean Eli. Did I say that right?
Yep.
Gotcha. And we're looking forward to a great and also very funny episode because this guy, guess what, specializes in the comedian field. So I'm gonna sit back and let him give a quick introduction, and then we're gonna go at it. It's because you said free pie earlier.
Yeah. I said what's really my middle name, Eli, rhymes with free pie. But I don't have any pie, and if I did, I probably wouldn't eat it during the recording.
Thank you.
I do have club soda though.
Okay.
So I have to say that you put the pressure on you. You tell me you have to be funny, and it's easy when I have material I'm ready to do on stage. It's scary in an interview.
I imagine that it just comes natural, right?
Sometimes the more comfortable I am, I think the easier it is. I have to say, I meet people who are public speakers and they tell me I have a hard job being a stand-up comedian. And I'm like, why? And they say, you have to be funny. And funny's easy. You have to be interesting. To me, that's a lot harder.
I never thought about that, but that's actually a really good point.
Yeah, I don't have to tell the truth. I don't have to make sense. I just have to make people laugh.
Huh. But that's still not easy. I don't think that's easy.
I mean, I think hitting a fastball is hard, but there's people who are good at
it. Touche. Gotcha. All right. Fair enough. So tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I'm a failed baseball player. I played through 8th grade and wasn't that good. I was good at getting walked. That was my skill. Stand there like this, not swing at a ball, and 4 balls go by, and I end up on first base.
Did the coach tell you to do that?
He actually told me, he gave me advice. It worked out well, and I wasn't a good hitter. It didn't bother me because I knew he was right. He said, why don't you let him try to get 1 strike on you before you swing at a pitch? And sometimes just 4 balls would go by. And even if they get 2, even if they start out with 2 balls and no strikes, I have the advantage. So I got on first base a lot. Didn't do me much good once I got there.
But you did it.
Yeah. Well, listen, there was no pressure on us. We were kids. We played for fun. And then we went out for ice cream. It wasn't like things are now.
Oh, those were the good days. Yeah.
Team
sports were actually team sports, and
yeah,
it was fun.
We didn't have little league parents. Parents didn't even show up. It was for the kids. That's all.
Gotcha.
But nothing funny about playing baseball in 4th grade. Particularly to talk about. I don't know why I brought it
up. All right. So, I'm sorry. So if
well, I'm glad you're laughing because I remember when I was a kid, my older brother read an interview with Woody Allen in some magazine, and at the time, Woody Allen was making funny movies, and he was the peak of his career, I think, in terms of comedy. And my brother said he couldn't imagine an interview with Woody Allen not being funny, but the interview wasn't funny. And that stuck with me. And I realized if you're a comedian, people expect you to be funny. And it doesn't even matter. It could be like 5 minutes into a first date. If she's not laughing, obviously I'm a terrible comedian. Or I meet somebody at a business meeting, or I sit next to them on an airplane, and they just expect me to be funny.
Do you get that a lot?
Yeah. The biggest thing is somebody says, oh, you're a comedian, tell me a joke. And I'm like, I didn't come here to work. What do you do for a living? And once the guy was an event planner, and I'm like, oh, plan me an event, and I'll tell jokes at it.
On the spot. That's fair. That's
Yeah,
fair. That's because that is your occupation. So why
yeah.
should you have to do it on demand for free?
Well, yeah, I appreciate that you get that because I mean, doctors and lawyers don't like people asking them for advice for free, and people are like, doesn't cost them anything to talk. Like, yeah, but that's what they get paid for.
Exactly. Exactly. What was the point of you working to hone your craft and just for you to do it on the spot for free when you typically get paid a lot of money to do it?
Well, I have a marketing background, so I have an idea. Let me show you. When somebody says, tell me a joke, I hand them my business card and I say, my business card has my web address on it. And if you go to my website, you can see 9 comedy videos. You can read 50,000 words worth of jokes on my website, which is a lot of comedy material.
Yeah.
And then they say, but what about, I don't want to, that's for later. What about now? And I say, turn over the card. And I don't think you can see it very well here with that I'm using a virtual background, but the back of my business card has jokes on the back, on it. So if people say, tell me a joke, I just say, turn over the card.
Huh. That's
And then I walk away because I don't want to have a conversation.
fair enough. As you know how people say mic drop, that's a card drop right there.
Yeah.
Card drop, walk away.
Except I don't want it on the ground. Actually, as the owner of 4 very expensive microphones, I hate when people talk about, drop the mic. Like, no, I paid for that microphone.
I never understood why at rock concerts people would break their guitars.
I guess if they can afford new guitars, it looks pretty cool.
That's horrible for business.
Well, if listen, if you're the Who, you can afford a new guitar every concert.
Fair enough.
If you're a Who cover band, though, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah. Yeah, your overhead expenses are ridiculous at that point, Tom.
Yeah.
Just run around breaking guitars.
You're making $1,000 for a show, and you spend 200 of it on broken equipment.
Doesn't make sense.
Well, there was a cartoon when I was a kid. It was like El Kabong or something, where some guy hit people with a guitar, and that was his weapon. That's all I remember about it.
I'm glad it was a cartoon. So what got you into comedy?
A woman talked me into it. I was on a first date, and I'd been writing jokes and selling them to TV, but I hadn't been performing. And she said, "Why don't you try stand-up comedy?" And I said, "I love it, but I'm not a performer." The last time I was on stage was the 5th grade play, and I hated it. And so I said, "I'm never doing that again." And then she said, "Well, why don't you start with taking a comedy class?" And she had just taken a stand-up class, and she suggested I try it. And I did, and started performing, and got less terrible, and then a little more less terrible, and eventually realized I could get paid for it.
Huh. So what is it like your first time getting in front of a crowd and like
Oh,
I can't imagine it. Like the weight of the world has to feel like it's on you before you even open your mouth.
well, here's the thing. It might have been a little different for me. I'd done a little bit of public speaking because I worked in a corporation. So occasionally I gave a talk somewhere, but it was usually to people I knew, I was presenting to a committee of coworkers. So I had a little bit of public speaking experience, but not a lot. But I knew a couple of things. I knew my jokes were pretty good. I've been writing comedy for a long time. I knew my jokes were okay. I knew my delivery would be terrible because it was my first time. I was new at it.
Mhm.
So I said, I'm going to do the best I can. The only worry I had was forgetting my jokes. But I spent the week before rehearsing, it was 5 minutes. So the week before rehearsing over and over again. And the day before the show, I took that day off and just spent the entire day going over my set. And when I got on stage, I said to the guy running it, the teacher, I want to go early to get it over with because I'm nervous. Just don't put me on first. So of course he put me on first. And, after the MC was a professional comedian, warmed up the crowd. I went on and I did fine. I was scared to death. I was really nervous. And then for some reason, after my set, I didn't want to stick around and watch. I just wanted to walk out of the building for a minute. And it was a Caroline's Comedy Club, which is in a basement in Times Square. And I walked upstairs and the weirdest thing happened. I felt like having a cigarette, and I'm not a smoker.
Huh.
but something said, I just feel like having a cigarette. I don't know why. And I didn't have any cigarettes. I didn't smoke. And, haven't had one since, but it was just the urge I had, which was weird.
Huh. What do you think? What do you think prompted you to want a cigarette?
I have no idea because I don't like smoke. It's just very strange.
Wow. So did the fear ever go away? Do you still get it now?
It's gone away. I mean, I've done thousands and thousands of shows. It's gone away, but occasionally it comes back if there's a reason to be nervous. Like I shot a TV special a year and a half ago, and that was scary. Even though I was the one who produced it, so if anything went wrong, I would cut myself out. I mean, it wouldn't have been a big deal. There were 6 of us in the show, and if I had it wasn't live, it was recorded, and the editor worked for me. So if there are any problems, I mean, like just take that joke out, or use this different camera angle or whatever. So there really was no reason to be nervous. It was a theater that I'd done dozens of shows in before, but I was still a little bit nervous, and I'd screwed a few jokes up here and there.
Okay, so that's real interesting. Like,
but that's the beauty of stand-up comedy. If you don't know, I mean, if we're singing a song and you know the song and we make a mistake, we made a mistake. But if you're a pianist playing a concert and we know the piece you're playing and you make a mistake, we notice it. In stand-up comedy, most of the mistakes we make aren't glaringly obvious, and you don't know the joke. You've never heard it before. So if we screw up, and unless we leave out a detail that we need later and forget that we left it out and the joke doesn't make any sense, people don't notice. So we screw up all the time and just doesn't get noticed.
Wow. Now that in its own has to be a real talent there. Like to be able to, hey, I messed up, but just keep your cool, keep your composure, keep going like nothing happened. That right there has to be. Did that take work, or is that just something that just came with it?
I don't know whether it's talent or luck. I remember there was a club that used to they had 2 showrooms, and they do shows every hour. One showroom, then the other showroom, then the first showroom. So you could do 6 shows in a night, and in the same building. And by the 5th show, and some comedians, like if they're doing a 20-minute set, it's their same 20-minute set. They do it the same way. Others skip around, and I'm a skip around kind of guy. So I think it was the 5th show, and I'm like, I wanted to tell this joke about my parents, but I couldn't remember if I told it in that room or in that show or like an hour earlier or the hour before that. So I'm like, hey, did I ever tell you about my parents? And they're like, no. And I'm like, oh, good. I'm going to tell you about my parents because otherwise I risk repeating a joke.
Yeah. That was actually cool. But you also got audience interaction too.
Yeah.
So how much of your routines do you base, or do you really implement crowd interaction? Like, do you do that a lot?
Not a lot, but somewhat. I think it really, and that's the scariest part of stand-up comedy when you start is, because you ask the audience a question, you don't know what the answer is going to be. But, and it's called crowd work. MCs usually do it. You just, to warm up the audience, you just got to say, where are you from? What do you do for a living? Just to start a conversation. And the scary part is, what if somebody, like this actually happened to me when I was emceeing a show at a theater. I said to a woman, what do you do for a living? And she said, I've spent the last year and a half taking care of my child who has cancer. And like, there's no joke you can come up with in that situation. I said, oh my God, you're the best mom ever. How about a hand for this mom? And that just, so then I just moved on to the next person, because there's no possible joke I could think of about her, about her kid having cancer.
See, that would have just stopped me. I would have been like, oh,
I
wouldn't have thought to go to the next person, but you actually turned into, hey, you know what? Give her a hand. I think that's something that's not natural that people are able to do. You guys possess a very unique skill set.
I think that's practice. If that had happened to me a year or two earlier, I might not have known what to do. But I mean, there are times I've said to people, what do you do for a living? They say I'm unemployed. And I'd be like, well, what do you want to do? And as long as I don't say like, president or, quarterback for the New York Giants or something like, as long as I say something reasonable, I'll say, oh, wait, we got 200 people here. Let me ask, hey, does anybody, I'm like, by the end of the show, we're going to find you a job. Hey, does anybody here need a welder or whatever, and that just, changes the subject. And then I can go on to the next person.
That's pretty cool. That's actually pretty cool. Like there's, oh man, that's so aspiring comedians, what would you suggest for them to work on the most, like getting into this?
Well, starting out, I would say take a comedy class, because even if it's not the best class, you're going to be in a supportive environment. Like that show I told you about at Caroline's, it's in front of friends and family of the people in the class. So it's a supportive environment to do the first show. And the room is packed because everybody wants you to succeed. So it's a really good way. And even if the teacher's not great, they will teach you a few things so that some mistakes not to make. They'll teach you how to structure a joke. You will learn something. And some comedians will say, oh, you can't learn from a class. You got to go up on stage and basically suck. And I think, yeah, but you can get a leg up on everybody else's first time if you got some instruction beforehand.
I think that's actually really great advice. Really
and then I would say, get on stage and just keep getting you ask any comedian for advice and the answer is the same. It's stage time, stage time, stage time. I would say though, work on your weaknesses. If you're a good performer, spend more time writing. If you're a good writer, you got to get on stage more to work on your performing skills.
Gotcha. So when you first became, actually we haven't touched Brain Champagne yet.
My website.
Yeah. I just thought about that. I was about to ask a question. I was like, we haven't even talked about Brain Champagne yet.
Good. Keep mentioning my URL. I'm fine with that. Say it 20 more times.
We will have it in the description too. So
cool.
It will be in the link.
Yeah, it's also right below my picture, next to my name, right over there. So when I started out in comedy in 2003. And the internet was around, but not every comedian had a website. Mm-hmm. And most comedians' website was like their first name, their last name.com. If they had a common enough name that somebody else already had that, then they would be like, joesmithcomedy.com or joesmithcomedian.com. And I realized nobody would spell Sean right. Nobody would spell Eli right. And between the two of them, that's 6 different combinations of my name. And a URL at the time cost $50 a year. And I'm like, there's no way I'm spending an extra $250 just to have all the combinations. And also, I noticed before I started in comedy, there was a couple of comedians I remember seeing. And one is Dom Irera and the other is Al Lubell. And both of them have jokes about their name. And the advantage of that is if you have a joke about your name and you go on stage and you say your name several times, people remember your name. Otherwise, they only heard it when the MC introduced you and when you say, I'm Sean Eli, thank you, good night, and nobody remembers. But if you have jokes about your name, people remember. So I have that, but also I wanted a URL that was memorable. And Brain Champagne rhymes, and I think comedy is sort of like champagne for the brain. And people remember it. And like you, people ask me about it.
You might have just given like the best marketing tip in the world right there.
Well, if you think about it, I didn't think about it at the time, but if you think about it, the world's biggest bookstore online is not books.com. The biggest bank online is not bank.com. The biggest search engine is not search or lookup.com, right?
Yeah.
They all have memorable names, and the names have nothing to do with the product. Google, Amazon, none of those have to do with what their product is.
That's true.
They're just memorable. So I think just having a memorable URL is really important.
Oh, that's actually, thank you. I appreciate that. That's
Sure.
Actually a really good tip right there. I really never think about that. What the heck is a Twitter?
Exactly.
No idea.
Or a Facebook.
That is still the weirdest name ever. I just don't understand where that thought process. I'm gonna have to watch that documentary. Evidently, it was explained. I didn't watch it though.
Well, I think what I remember was from colleges. Before I went to college before the internet, and they put out a freshman directory with everybody's picture in it. And I don't know whether they called it where, at Harvard, where Facebook's founder went to school, but at Penn, where I went to school, they called it the pig book because everybody was ugly. But maybe they called it the Facebook there, and so he called his website Facebook.
Oh.
And maybe not. Maybe he just came up with the name. I don't remember.
I want to stick with that story though, because I
Okay.
think that actually makes a lot of sense. Plus, you'll save me having to watch the whole documentary to find out. But if that's the truth, and I'm sticking with it.
All right.
So, getting into comedy, do you just go into a comedy club and say, "Hey, I want on the stage"? How does that go?
If you do, they will say, we have an open mic on Tuesday nights. Sign up in advance or sign up at 4:00, or it costs $5 or whatever. So you basically go to an open mic night, and depending on where you are, it may or may not be good. If you go to an open mic in New York City or LA, everybody there is just another comedian waiting for their chance to perform. Most of them aren't paying attention. It's very cliquey. It's mostly 20-year-old angry misogynists living in their parents' basement. And all their jokes are about smoking pot and masturbating and playing video games because that's their whole life. And so that part of it is difficult. But if you go to a smaller city, sometimes the open mic at a comedy club has an audience. And then you get to perform in front of people who are there to watch comedy, not there to do their own 5 minutes. And then you just keep going back and keep going back. And I think the best advice somebody gave me with that is you record your set. Now it's easy. You can record it with video because everybody's got a phone, and a video camera costs $200. You record your set, you type it out word for word, and you draw a circle around where you get all the laughs. And if there's too many spaces between two circles, you've got to condense that. Anything that doesn't belong there, any words or sentences that don't advance the plot of the joke, you cross out.
Wow.
And then your set gets tighter and tighter.
It's like you just explain, like you guys have like your own analytic system.
It pretty much, it's, if you have a joke and it takes you a minute to get to the laugh, you can maybe do that joke once you've established a rapport with the audience. They know you're funny. But if you open with that, after 30 seconds, they're going to be bored. You really have to get people laughing. And if you have a minute before you get to a punchline, it better be a damn strong punchline.
Gotcha.
People have waited a minute. If you have a laugh every 10 seconds, it's great.
I probably, like most other people, didn't realize that there's such a science to this.
It kind of is, I guess. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen the show Bar Rescue.
No.
Okay, so there's a guy who's a bar consultant, and he goes into a bar that's said to him, "Hey, we need help." And he goes in, he fixes what's wrong with the bar so they can make money. And they describe that as bar science. And he's like, you need to make this much per square foot. You need to make this much per drink. Here's the slow parts. Here's what you're doing wrong. Here's why you're not getting people in the door. Maybe they got to change the name of the bar. And they just remake the bar. And in a sense, every time you write a routine, you've got to go through and fix it. It's not, a first draft is only a first draft. And it's pretty rare that somebody goes on stage with a new joke and the new joke just kills right out of the bat.
Gotcha. So typically, do you guys, how long does it, from beginning to end, how long does it take for a routine to be to where you feel like it's ready to be, part of the act?
It depends. It could be, the first time it's okay, and then you work on it from there. It could be, well, if a joke doesn't get laughs 3 or 4 times, you put it aside. And you say, I'll deal with it later. I'll try to fix it. Or maybe run it by a colleague who says, oh, well, here's your problem. But you never know. I mean, there's a joke I have that I've told 100 times. And once I was doing it and I was doing pretty well, and I told the joke and it didn't get a laugh. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. And I just, went on. And then when I got home, the next day I watched the video because I record almost all of my sets. I watched the video and I realized it's a joke about an ex-girlfriend. And normally I'm smiling or I look happy when I'm telling the joke. But for some reason, I looked really upset and I sounded angry when I was telling it that night. And the anger talking about the ex-girlfriend didn't work because if I was angry at her, I shouldn't be making fun of her. It just seemed unfair. And I think that was the problem. And now I have it in my head that when I tell this joke, I got to make sure I'm smiling when I tell it, just so it doesn't look like I'm bashing somebody.
But see that right there, that's why I say like it's like you guys broke it down to a science, because who else would think of that? I personally, I don't think about inflection. I don't think about, I guess, my delivery, facial expressions, and I think that takes a lot of, that's the word. I think that takes a lot of EQ. I think you guys have a real great understanding of emotional intelligence and being able to read the room. I think that that's amazing.
Well, thanks. I mean, there are some comics who are very facial expression oriented, and I'm not. That's the only time I really think about my face, is just to make sure that joke works. And that's only because something went wrong. Some people are much better at it. But a friend of mine's daughter started doing stand up, and she's okay. Nobody knew as good, but she tells her jokes very deadpan. And it's not because it's a strategy, it's because she's just so nervous about it. She just wants to get the words out. And I watched her and I'm like, that's how I started. And now I know how to sound more emotive when I talk, because it's like actors have to act. You can't just go on stage and recite your lines. You have to be over the top. You have to, I don't want to say overact, but you have to try to make it more emotional, because it's got to be bigger on stage than it would be in a regular conversation. And comedy's the same way.
You ever think about acting?
I'm probably the only comic who my goal isn't having a sitcom. I acted a little bit, as I said, I was in the 5th grade play. I didn't like it. I took one acting class and I said, you know what? I'm glad I did it, but it's not for me.
You did
everything I do. And stand-up comedy in a way is the opposite of acting, because when you're an actor, you're being somebody else. When you're a stand-up comedian, you're being yourself. You're being maybe a bigger version of yourself, or a more exaggerated or more confident version, but you're just being yourself.
That's actually a good way of looking at that. But yeah, cool. All right. So, favorite comedian?
You're looking at him. I'm my favorite.
I love it. And on that, there must be a really high level of confidence that you guys have to have. Like, I mean, I know, like you said, it takes a lot of practice to do it, but to go out there every time, hey, I'm gonna own this stage, everyone is gonna laugh. Like, is there a mantra or a mindset that you take out there every time that you get on that stage?
Well, when I started in comedy, a comedian named Jessica Curson was running the new talent nights at Gotham Comedy Club. And she said, when she goes out on stage, she has the attitude, I'm not going to let them not laugh at me. And she is just a monster on stage. That's not me. But it really, I guess it takes a pretty big ego to say, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to make them laugh. But then again, if you're a singer, I'm going to go out and make the audience rock. Or if you're an actor, I'm going to make them laugh, or I'm going to make them cry, depending on what you're doing. If you're a preacher, you're also trying to move people, emotionally. But I know my stuff is funny, and I go out there and I try to prove it to everybody. That's all that.
Where can we find your shows? Like where can we find your shows?
Well, I've headlined, let me brag a little bit. I've headlined shows on 5 continents, but I have barely left New York State in the last year and a half because of COVID. And international touring is probably not going to resume until the rest of the world is vaccinated. So that could be a couple of years. Oh, but if you go to my website, brainchampagne.com, and you click on, I think the link is shows, it'll have a list of shows. So I'm in Connecticut this weekend. I just really basically started rebooking or booking shows again after COVID. So I've got shows in Virginia. I'm working on shows in Maryland. I've got shows in New York and Connecticut. And I'm working on basically the Northeast right now, places I can drive to.
Gotcha. You ever been to Seattle?
I haven't been to Seattle. Are you in Seattle?
Yes, you got to come out here.
Can you find me a gig? I do show. I'm a clean comic, so I do shows at houses of worship. I do shows at country clubs.
We'll make it happen.
All right.
We'll make it happen. Definitely. All right. So biggest take, biggest take the audience should take, biggest lesson the audience should take. What do you think it is?
That's a good question. I don't know. I would say if you're seeing a comic that isn't doing well, be on their side because they don't want to suck and you shouldn't want them to suck either. And I was talking to somebody, there's a theater I do shows at regularly. And the guy, the executive director of the theater, was telling me that a local organization in his town has a comedian every year at a fundraiser. And he said they always book terrible comedians. And I said, why is that? And he said, I don't know, just the person. And I'm like, maybe it's not your taste. And he's like, no, half the people walk out. I'm like, then why do they keep doing this? But I'd say, people are trying. And if your friend starts out in stand-up comedy and he needs you to come to shows when he's bad, that's when he needs you. When he's famous, he doesn't need you to come to shows anymore. He's got people willing to pay to see him or her.
Yeah, good point. Good point. I'd rather
So
be on this
be
side when
supportive.
the worst.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Sean, for joining us today. We're about out of time. We will have your link in the description. So guys, make sure you go and check. If you are so lucky if you're on the Northeast right now, because if I was over there now, I'd find out where his next show is. But like we said, we're gonna work on getting you out here in Seattle. So yeah,
I'd love to come to Seattle. And my brother lives in Minnesota, so I'd stop by and see him on the way back.
There you go. It's a win-win.
Yeah.
We'll make it happen. So thanks for joining us today, Sean. And Net Builders, thank you for tuning in and watching another episode, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Hey, hope you enjoyed the show. Quick word before you go. Remember, smash that subscribe button. Shoot some likes over. Throw a comment down there. Let us know what you thought about the episode, all right? Hey, also, check out my business, ProEntityLLCGroup.com. If you're in the market for digital marketing, holla at your boy. Peace.